Hello, I'm Kaiser and welcome to Moose Reads. Before I get started, I want to say that the opinions that I give here are my own opinions. They are extremely subjective. If I dislike a book, it is not a reflection on the author and it is not a reflection on people who do like it. Different people have different tastes, and that's okay. Today, I will be reviewing Cibola Burn by James S. A. Corey. This is the fourth book in the Expanse series. It is a sci-fi novel. The description says, "The gates have opened the way to 1,000 new worlds, and the rush to colonize has begun. Settlers looking for a new life stream out from humanity's home planets. Illis, the first human colony on this vast new frontier, is being born in blood and fire. Independent settlers stand against the overwhelming power of a corporate colony ship with only their determination, courage, and the skills learned in the long wars of home. Innocent scientists are slaughtered as they try to survey a new and alien world. The struggle on Illis threatens to spread all the way back to Earth. James Holden and the crew of his one small ship are sent to make peace in the midst of war and sense in the midst of chaos. But the more he looks at it, the more Holden thinks the mission was meant to fail. And the whispers of a dead man remind him that the great galactic civilization that once stood on this land is gone, and that something killed it." 4 stars. I said initially that a large part of why I wanted to read this series was because I watched the television show and felt that the 4th season, when they switched networks, felt different in a way that I found unpleasant. I wanted to see if that was the result of the network shift or simply carried over from the books. This book does represent a shift of sorts, from dealing with alien nonsense within our own solar system to launching a mass exodus and land grab, so it could have gone either way. Now I've read the book, I can definitively say that the problem was with the network. Or it was with me. I wanted to go back and rewatch it because the descriptions for the season imply it's the same plot, but I thought I remembered it being rather different. I still may, but after the first episode I was left with the feeling that the entire show just made everyone meaner and more callous. So maybe the feeling just got worse in season 4. At any rate, this is about the book, not the series, so let's get to it. I liked the book. It was very much in keeping with the tone of the previous books, despite the nominal shift in the plot. I also liked all of the POV characters for this one, so that gave it a leg up over the 3rd book. This was the first time where we see people from previous entries make a return, which was an interesting change. Aside from Holden, none of the POV characters are the same, but we get to spend time with Havelock, who was Miller's former partner, as well as a friend of Praxidike's who was briefly in Caliban's war and lost his son to the evil scientists, Basia. I felt very bad for Basia in this book. Even though he was mixed up with the wrong sorts of people, I certainly don't blame him for wanting to defend his new home from corporate annexation after his life was upended by corporations and he was refused a place in our solar system. This book was very frustrating on that front. A group of refugees, including Basia, were displaced when the alien super soldier program shattered life on Ganymede, and then nobody would take them in. So once the gates opened onto thousands of new worlds, they took the opportunity to establish their own place. Seems fair. But then the corporations, with a mandate from the UN, come to take control of the same planet in the same place. Technically, this first run is made up of scientists interested in studying the planet, something that was supposed to be done remotely before the colonists made contamination a pressing issue. At the same time, I really felt like the specific corporation in question and the UN were needlessly antagonizing people that they abandoned. Setting aside the fact that there are thousands of new worlds to study and they could probably just leave that one alone, they deliberately set up camp in the same place. Elvie, our 4th POV character and one of the scientists, even points this out at some point, though only in her own head. See, if the scientists are worried about cross-contamination, it seems they'd have better luck doing the science as far away from the colonists as possible. Sure, the cross-contamination is going to be an issue eventually, but that's kind of a foregone conclusion at this point, so I'd think the results would be better elsewhere. But there's precious ore where the colonists are, and despite their claims that they just want to science, they're definitely keeping an eye on the profits. Also, they renamed the planet, and the only reason for them to do that is to deny the colonists any grace with regards to living there. Elvie, incidentally, became increasingly frustrating to me as the book progressed. From the start, she refers to the colonists as squatters, which is bullshit. The idea that anyone owns any of the planets without setting foot on them is ridiculous. But as the book progresses, she spends more and more time with them, gets to know some of them, works with them, and still calls them squatters in her head. I kept waiting for her to realize that they had just as much right to the planet as anyone, and that both they and her group of scientists were the same colonists, but she never really got there. I've said of some of these books that despite being engaging and very well constructed, the plots sometimes sound quite dull. Not the case with this one. This book is a non-stop chain of disasters. If it's not one problem, it's another, except when it's both at once. Okay, that's it for no spoilers. If you don't like spoilers, now is the time to pause or close the video. For everyone else, let's talk details. Basia is mixed up in what is arguably a terrorist group. They set up explosives to destroy the landing platform at their colony so the corporate ships can't land. Because the guy in charge is an asshole, the timing gets fucked, and the ship comes to land on top of the bombs. Since Basia isn't an asshole, he blows it early, hoping that the shuttle will still be high enough to avoid casualties. It's not, so this kicks off the trouble, and Holden is summoned. Holden is sent to Ilus as a neutral mediator. The general theory is that everybody hates him a little bit, so no one can say he's biased. Not a great theory, since everyone seems to think his first loyalty is to the OPA. Still, I think this could have worked out okay, except that they didn't give him any authority. In response to their people being bombed, and with a tip from Elvie, who accidentally discovers more explosives in the alien ruins, the security team heads out to set a trap. The terrorists aren't stupid, though, so the asshole takes them around the back, and they murder the entire team. They then bury the bodies, so the security people seemingly just disappear. That brings Murtry, the head of security on the larger transport ship still in orbit, down to the planet with most of the rest of his security force. And force is the name of the game. He's not stupid either, so he assumes the colonists did, in fact, murder the security team, and he declares martial law. This is the point where I got very frustrated. Holden arrives just about the same time as Murtry and tells him that nobody is killing anybody. The asshole colonist then threatens Murtry, who has decided that preemptive murder is cool if he or his people feel threatened, and therefore murders the guy. If Holden had been given any authority, he could have arrested Murtry right then and there, which would have solved half of the problems going forward. Not that it would have worked. It becomes increasingly clear that Murtry is a murderous egomaniac, and he'd probably kill all of the colonists happily in order to ensure the corporate claim. But I would have liked someone to try. It also drove me nuts that nobody pointed out that the security team was in the alien ruins when they went missing, and while murder was possible, and what actually happened, without any evidence, it's just as possible that alien shenanigans are responsible. I kept waiting for someone to point that out, but nobody did. Murtry is the absolute worst, but there were 2 points where I expected him to do something that he surprisingly never tried. Things happen, and they end up taking shelter from a deadly storm in the alien ruins with limited food and water. One of their main sources of water, however, is a machine the scientists drag in that can purify water, thereby making it potable. I fully expected Murtry to take control of this machine, and by extension the water supply, and make demands. But either the thought never occurred to him, or he had the sense to know that nobody would stand for it. Later, the torrential rains have forced a subterranean species of slugs to the surface, and everyone discovers, rather unfortunately, that they secrete a deadly toxin. Holden eventually comes across Murtry studying one under glass, and I thought Corey was foreshadowing him weaponizing them, but he never did that either. So I guess he could have been worse, but not much. There were also two things with Amos that kind of annoyed me. First, Amos says multiple times throughout the book that he's going to kill Murtry. I kept waiting for this to happen, but it never does. Amos doesn't even get to take part in the final confrontation with him. Holden does. But more frustrating than that, Amos falls into the most obvious trap two people can set, and given that he's our resident killer, he should have known better. See, Holden goes off to deal with some alien shit, hopefully to shut down a defense grid that will 100% kill everyone if they don't deal with it. Because Murtry is the worst, he goes after Holden to stop him, reasoning that the alien technology belongs to the corporation, and Holden therefore has no right to damage it. And since Holden told Amos to make sure Murtry didn't kill anyone, Amos follows Murtry. Murtry took one of his people with him, and she's waiting just inside an alien transfer hub for Amos. Amos stops to talk to her, and if you can't see where this is going, you're not paying attention. Obviously, Murtry was hiding opposite the security person, waiting for an opportunity to shoot Amos in the back, which he does. I just don't understand how Amos fell for it. I'm also not entirely sure I understood the ending. There's some shenanigans with Proto-Miller and an empty space that seems to turn off the alien stuff. They basically use the empty space to turn off the planet, which is clear enough, but I don't really understand how that worked. I did, however, really like the way Corey described the empty space. It was an interesting exercise in describing the indescribable. Also, it really irritates me that the corporates won the name game. Illis is a perfectly serviceable name, but apparently the planet is officially New Terra, which is a stupid name, and nobody should have allowed it in the first place. That's a whole lot of nitpicks, but I want to be clear that they are nitpicks. Amos falling for the trap is the only thing I will actively call a flaw in the book, because he really should have seen it coming. Everything else is minor irritations or thwarted predictions. Overall, I thought this book was great. I'm certainly still on board for the series and can't wait to see where it goes. In point of fact, I wish I could do so faster. Sadly, I must depend upon my library, and these books are quite popular. That's all I have to say about Cibola Burn. If you like this video, I hope you'll watch more in the future. Thanks for watching this one. Bye!